Good evening. I'm John Miko, the Executive Director of the Union League Legacy Foundation. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our first of the 2020-21 Jack Templeton Liberty Series programs. The Legacy Foundation is a nonprofit charity of the Union League of Philadelphia, guided by the United States Constitution and the history, the values, and the spirit of the Union League. The Legacy Foundation's mission is to create more informed, more engaged citizen leaders. We do this through a host of programs, including caring for one of the great Civil War collections in the United States, through exhibits, through constitutional and civics education for high school students, and by providing college scholarships to tomorrow's future leaders. And through programs like tonight's Jack M. Templeton Liberty Series. I want to thank all those who make this possible. We are funded through the voluntary contributions of Union League members and others who share our values and want to share them with others. So tonight, a few housekeeping items. For those of you who are in the audience, we do have note cards and you can ask questions through the note cards. For those of you watching on Zoom, you can use the function in the middle of the bottom middle, the Q&A function, ask questions anytime throughout the program itself. The program will run about an hour and we'll get to as many of the questions as we can towards the end of the program. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce to you the chair of the Legacy Foundation, Joan Carter. Joan.
Hello. I am very pleased to introduce what is our 60th, count them, 60.
Wow.
60th virtual program since the government shutdown.
Wow.
Forced nearly all of the legacy programs to go virtual back in March of this year. And I'm even more pleased that our program tonight is what we're calling a hybrid, which means that for the first time in 8 months, we actually have people, we have an audience, small and elite, I might add, but as well as those attending virtually. So tonight, less than a week after the election, we have a very unique opportunity to hear from one of the most influential economists and policy commentators in the United States, Steve Moore. Steve is chairman of the Task Force on Economic Revival at FreedomWorks. And FreedomWorks is a grassroots organization that supports individual liberty and free markets. Tonight's discussion will be led by Charles Mitchell. Charles is, by the way, a Union League member. He is also the president and CEO of Commonwealth Foundation, a Pennsylvania-based think tank whose mission is to transform free market ideas into public policies so that all Pennsylvanians can flourish. So it is now my pleasure to introduce Charles Mitchell and Steve Moore.
Well, thank you, Joan. I would like you to know, although I am very active in Pennsylvania public policy, I decided to spare you what typically begins our governor's presentations. I didn't bring my hand sanitizer and I did not take my mask off for the camera. We're just going to launch into the conversation with one of the most interesting and incisive economic commentators of our time, Steve Moore. I want to say, at the very outset, we're not letting Steve leave here before he also becomes a Union League member. We're going to work on that, over dinner and cigars tonight. We got a plan for that. And I also have to say, it's such an honor to be with you, not just to be with Steve, although I do love the guy, and we're all fans here, but because Jack Templeton and the Templetons have been great friends and patrons, not just of the Union League and the Legacy Foundation, but Commonwealth Foundation, which really would not exist if not for their support. So such a pleasure to be with you guys tonight. Steve, I know you have a few prefatory comments you'd like to make with us. Since I said you're such an incisive and interesting commentator, I'm going to quote you before we do that.
I hate when people quote me.
So we're here to talk about what the next 4 years might look like. Steve, I do read your stuff. I am a fan. You said earlier this year, comparing the Trump economic agenda with the Biden plan is like comparing the moon landing with the Hindenburg. Thought that might be a good starting off point for what you have to say to us tonight. Steve, take it away.
Thank you, Charles. I love what you guys do at Commonwealth, and Joan, thank you so much. I'm honored to be invited here. Adam Brandon with Freedom Works has been. You guys did amazing work this year, Adam. So congratulations. I thought I'd just make some preliminary comments, and then I really do want to hear. I do want this to be a discussion. So first of all, I have to say I'm a little insulted that none of the dead people who voted didn't show up tonight. I don't know where they all are, but first of all, let me start by saying that I'm going to start by saying something provocative. I sincerely believe that if the election were tomorrow and not last Tuesday, Donald Trump would have won pretty easily, because two big things happened. Obviously in the last week that would have been, in my opinion, huge game changers. One was we got another monster jobs report on Friday showing almost 1 million private sector jobs added. That's a pretty amazing number. And as I put it on Fox News that morning, it's very uncommon if you're riding on the back of Secretariat and you're racing down the towards the home stretch toward the finish line that you change horses. And so that was number one. And of course, the news that came out today about the vaccine. This is also an economic game changer. And I just wish that news had come out a couple of weeks ago. And Trump deserves a lot of credit, for Operation Warp Speed. It looks like it worked. But most of us here are advocates of the free enterprise system. It's capitalism that has created this virus. I mean, not the virus, the vaccine. So I just wish, I'm kind of heartbroken as a guy who worked for Donald Trump, who admires him greatly. He has certainly personality flaws, but I'm really proud of what Donald Trump achieved over the last 4 years for our economy. The second point I wanted to make was that this was a red wave. This was a red wave election. It was not a blue wave election. And that's just starting to sink in. We've also focused so much on, obviously, the all-important presidential race. But if you look at how this race changed in the last 3 weeks, it was pretty phenomenal. When you say, Adam, I mean, remember we were talking 3 or 4 weeks ago, like we were just going to get blitzed, like it was going to be 2018 all over again. And I think a lot of things changed over the last 3 or 4 weeks. One was that we just got a continued good economic news. And I think people started to see, hey, whatever Trump is doing, whether you like the way he dealt with the virus at the beginning, it seems to be working. This has been an amazing recovery. I call it the super V-shaped recovery. Nobody expected, well, the big number that came out was that 33% growth number. I mean, that is nothing short of spectacular. And it doubled the old rate. And by the way, people act as if this was like preordained that we're going to have this number. No, if you go back to back in June, before the quarter began, because the third quarter is July 1 through the end of September, all of the economic experts on Wall Street, the Congressional Budget Office forecasters, the Federal Reserve Board economists, all said maybe we'll get 10 to 12% growth in GDP. We didn't get 10 to 12, we got 33%. For those of you who don't follow these statistics that well, normally a quarter where if you get 4 to 5% growth is very good. So I think that was a big factor in why things changed. And then I think the second, Trump was awful in the first debate, but he was much better in the second debate. And the second debate, I think, shifted things considerably back. I mean, Trump lost huge ground. What was it, Adam, about 4 or 5 percentage points across the board. Republicans just dropped after that debate. But, it was a different story in the second debate, especially on issues that are important here in Pennsylvania. I think the fact that Biden couldn't tell a story about fracking was indicative of the fact, A, that, it shows how obsessed the left is with climate change, but B, it just showed he was not a decisive person. And then third, I just think, I always predicted that undecided voters, if you were still undecided by election day, you weren't going to go for Biden. And it is clear that undecided voters at the last minute went for Trump. So this was a red wave election, and it was amazing. If you look at what happened at the state and local level, instead of big losses for Republicans, I mean, here in, how many seats did you pick up in the legislature? Something like 7 or 8 or
Yes.
9?
Yes.
I mean, that's pretty
Including
amazing.
The minority leader going down.
Pretty incredible. Yeah.
Amazing.
I mean, so, and that didn't just happen in Pennsylvania. I mean, it happened in states throughout the country. Adam and I have talked a lot about what happened. I don't know if you all followed what happened in Texas, but George Soros and Bloomberg and other billionaires spent, what was the number? 100? More?
Bloomberg was 100 in Florida alone.
Wow. So over $100 million in Texas to win state races. And instead of turning Texas blue, Texas turned more red. In fact, they ended up picking up seats. So, I mean, I could go throughout the states and tell you about, what happened. But on balance, I talked to the people at ALEC who represent the state legislators. She was, Lisa Nelson was apoplectic a month ago. She thought, oh, my God, we're going to get wiped out. Instead, the Republicans ended up picking up a net of about 100 seats. So that's a pretty amazing thing. And the way I look, Donald Trump, whether you love him or hate him, had coattail effects. He had coattail effects on election day, no question about it. And the tragedy for me as a Trump guy is he pulled so many people over the goal line. The one person he couldn't pull over at the goal line was himself. Although I'm not conceding, I do think that there's a 1 in 4 chance that Trump could still pull this out. There's a lot of irregularities and a lot of votes to be counted. So I'll just give you one other kind of statistic that's fun. Republicans flipped, it looks like 5 state legislatures, which is really amazing because it looked like the Democrats were going to flip. So in other words, I think we won Montana, we won New Hampshire, both houses, New Hampshire, and there were 1 or 2 others that I can't remember. So that's just kind of an incredible thing. It was a red wave, it was not a blue wave. And by the way, the Democrats are obviously ecstatic that they won the presidency, or presumably have, but they're not happy. The donors are not happy that they spent, so many tens and tens of millions of dollars and it didn't move the needle. So that's a kind of an interesting thing. Third point I'd make is that there was Jerry Seib, who's a good friend of mine. Many of you may know him. He works for the Wall Street Journal and one of the most astute kind of political commentators. I love Jerry. I love his columns are must read. I got to know him very well when I worked at the Wall Street Journal. He had a column, saying it was a couple days after the election when votes still were kind of being counted all over the country. And he said, well, it looks like this was one of those elections where the red states got redder and the blue states got bluer. And I wrote him a note today saying, well, you got it half right. The red states got redder, but the blue states got redder as well. And so there were, look at what happened in New York. Look at what happened in California, my home state of Illinois, that rejected a massive tax increase that the governor, J.B. Pritzker, spent some $55 million of his own money to pass. And even the state people in Illinois, realized that they couldn't stand another tax increase. It's already the, the 3rd highest tax state in the country. California is an interesting story. Republicans did well. I mean, look, California is a deep, deep blue, the bluest of blue states. But Republicans actually picked up ground in California. It'd be hard for them to lose ground in California, but they did pick up ground. But also, I mean, I just wanted to point out, and maybe I hope I can remember them all. There were 4 or 5 major ballot initiatives that have, important national consequences. There's an old saying that, California is kind of the leader on these things. If it happens in California, it's coming to the rest of the country. Well, just think about this. First of all, rent control. It was on the ballot in California. It lost. The second one was racial preferences. It was about, I don't remember, 10 or 15 years ago, California passed an initiative to move to a colorblind society, something we're all in favor of, no discrimination. The left wanted to bring back racial preferences, and the voters by like 56 to 44 voted against racial preferences, which is a great thing. Let's see, the Uber, Lyft, you probably all followed that. The Uber Lyft referendum, which was a make or break for the gig economy, where the unions wanted to make Lyft and Uber drivers basically employees, and that would have just destroyed the whole model. And the voters voted that down. And by the way, Uber stock went through the roof on Wednesday after that passed. And then the big tax increase. This was kind of an historic thing because you all know as students of history that sort of the beginning of the modern conservative movement was Proposition 13 in California, which happened in, I think that was 1978. It was the big property tax cut that was the sonic boom politically that sort of laid the groundwork for the Reagan Revolution. And for 40 years, liberals have been trying to overturn Proposition 13. And once again, the voters said, no, we want the property tax capped. So that was all, good news. So the red states got redder and the blue states got redder. The fourth observation, money does not buy elections. Money does not buy elections. The Democrats, Adam's the expert on this. They outspent Republicans at least 3-1, wouldn't you say? I mean, nationally, what? 6-1? So, they were just deluging these races. But you saw it here in Pennsylvania. And money doesn't buy love and it doesn't buy elections. And, luckily that, there was just a lot of incompetence in the way that money was spent. And so I think that's and by the way, I just find it kind of ironic that for the last 25 years, all the Democrats have talked about is how we got to get money out of politics, right? Did you see one story? Anybody see one story about there's too much money in politics this year? Did you? I didn't. Where there was deluging, tens and hundreds of billions of millions of dollars spent. The next observation is just it's still a conservative country. This is a conservative country, and we are very split. I mean, I believe we are more culturally divided as a country than any time since the Civil War. I really believe that. I think there is a massive divide in this country that is bubbling over. This is why Biden keeps saying we're going to heal the country, heal the country. We'll see about that, but I think that you just have it's basically like, Republicans are on Venus and Democrats are on Mars. I mean, just as one example, I've read through the entire Joe Biden economic platform. Joe Biden keeps saying he's a moderate. There's nothing moderate about that platform. I read every single Democratic platform from 1960 through 2020. Think about that includes, obviously John F. Kennedy, LBJ, that includes, Walter Mondale, remember him, and George McGovern, and John Kerry, and Hillary Clinton, and, Jimmy Carter. None of them had anything even 1/10 as radical as what Biden ran on. And Biden ran on a $4 trillion tax increase, $4 trillion. Biden ran on basically eliminating our oil and gas industry. Biden ran on re-regulating America, just on and on and on and on. And it was, by the way, it was a very one of their themes that in their platform of the Democrats was, we want to, it was basically the opposite of drain the swamp, right? Trump ran on drain the swamp. They were basically saying, no, we have to resurrect government as a positive institution and so on, because the Democrats are the party of government. And so, I'm somewhat cheered by that. I think that the American people are generally sensible, but we do have a divide. Sixth, and I only have 7, then I'll be done. Trump and Trumpism are not going away. They're not going away, win or lose. Donald Trump will be, I believe there's a 50-50 chance that we have a rematch. Well, I don't know if Biden's going to be on the ballot, but I believe there's a 50-50 chance that, that Trump will be. Trump has, I have to say, I went to some of these southern, I live in Washington, D.C. We're only an hour, less than an hour and a half from the Pennsylvania border. So I went through to some of these, rallies. They were just the most amazing things I've ever seen in my life. We'd go to these towns with 40,000 people and 60,000 people. We're like, where did all these people come from? It was really amazing. And you just have, people with their pickup trucks and, waving the American flag and just extremely patriotic, and literally like 2 or 3 miles long of, trucks and cars. And, so Trump has a movement behind him, and people, it is true. People either love Trump or hate him. And unfortunately, I think in this election, hate did triumph over Trump, over love, not the other way around. But Trump will not go away. And even if he decides, well, I'm not going to run again, his movement, I think, has really transformed the Republican Party in a big way. And that is basically kind of economic populist message. And Adam and I, who are staunch free marketeers, we don't agree with every aspect of Trump. I used to, when I, meet with Donald Trump, I used to, give him a lot of grief on some of his trade policies, and but the fact is that this kind of, pro-free trade, pro-worker. That's the other thing I think that's so interesting, is that it's basically the Republican Party is the party of the working class. There's no question about that. Working class Americans voted for Trump overwhelmingly. The Democrats are the party of the elite. University professors, people in the media, the white wealthy people overwhelmingly voted for Trump. And then finally, and this is the last observation, then I'd love to hear all your comments. We really need to do something immediately about our government school system. It is an atrocity, and our kids don't know anything. And we used to kind of, make fun. I mean, I remember Adam, like 6 or 7 years ago, that poll came out that 20 kids, people between the ages of 30 and 18, 52% of them believe in socialism. We used to laugh about that, but they really do. They have been indoctrinated since the time they were in kindergarten. And this cannot continue. I think it is the single greatest threat to our republic, the abysmal state of our schools. And if anything good has come out of coronavirus, I think it has opened people's eyes to what an evil empire, and I say that very, without any reservations. The evil empire in America today is the teachers' unions. They are destroying our schools. What is going on with, here we are at the middle of November, and the schools are still not open. This is child abuse. This is outrageous. And so we need to do something about really rethinking our whole education system in America, because we cannot compete on a global level when the kids are coming out this stupid. And it's not their fault, it's ours. So I'll stop there.
Steve, that's great. And let's stay on that last point for a minute, if we could. You said a couple of things about how this election looked very different at the state level than it did at the presidential level. You just gave us, I think, a very inspiring call to arms about our schools and how we need to do something about that. Here in Pennsylvania, despite a governor who hates school choice, we've gotten big increases in that over the last few years. Maybe.
What do you mean? Like what you mean in terms of funding for?
Yeah,
good
scholarships for kids to get out of the current schools and go to better ones.
Fabulous.
So when you think about the opportunities you see in the states because of the returns that you described to us, and when you think about that problem, when you say we should do something, can you give the audience any further thoughts on what we should do about the school problem?
Well, I'm not an expert on, I've always been a huge advocate of school choice ever since I saw Free to Choose by Milton Friedman. When, that was one of his, I'll tell you one quick story. I used to have dinner with Milton, up in San Francisco. He was a good friend, and I'm proud to have called him a good friend. And, he was, I think at the time, like in his late 80s, and Rose was, a few years younger, and they were just an adorable couple. I love those guys. But anyway, I remember the last time I had dinner, and I'd go to San Francisco a couple times a year, and I'd call Milton and just say, hey, I'm coming to town, do you want to have dinner? And we'd put these little 5 or 6 people together, and we'd have dinner. And how cool is that to have dinner with Milton Friedman? And, I'm so frustrated. The one thing I really wish I had done was just to take a tape recorder and, recorded our conversations, because he is, one of the 3 greatest economists ever. And anyway, so, I remember one of our last dinners, there is a point to this story, which was at the end of one of our last dinners. I said, Milton, if you could be king for the day, what are the 3 most important things we could do to get, our economy to grow faster? And anybody want to guess what his 3 were? You want to take a wild guess? Guess what one of them was?
Clearly one of them must have been school choice.
Yes, absolutely. He said school choice for every child in America. Anybody want to guess what the second one was? John, you want to take a guess? No, it wasn't. It wasn't lower tax. I would have thought that's a good guess, but it wasn't. The second one was free trade. As you know, he was a staunch free trader. And the third one is, and this is an important lesson for where we are today with all this ridiculous talk about government, quote, stimulus. He said the most important thing we can do to grow our economy faster is to cut government spending. And I'll never forget, I asked him, well, Milton, by how much? And he said, Steve, as much as possible. We're living in this fantasy line that I know some of the folks here, I've got to chat with some of you, are in the investment business. There is this mythology that somehow government spending stimulates the economy. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But 80% of the Wall Street economists have believed that nonsense. And so, we need to, but school choice was one of them. And I believe it is really the most important thing. And we've got to find a way to, we've been talking about this now for 30 years. That's why what do we do? I don't know. I mean, what do we do to get people to figure this out? The reason I brought up the COVID situation is you're seeing a lot of parents now who are opting out of the government schools.
40% of parents have disenrolled their kids from the school they were in last year.
What
40.
percent?
40.
Nationally or here in town?
Nationally.
So, we're one of
Huge
those,
disruption.
and my feeling is, look, I think Trump has been fantastic. I mean, one of the tragedies of Trump not winning, if he earns up not winning, is his second, I've talked to him about this. He is all in on school choice.
He is.
And I believe one of his major, and that's why this is such a tragedy if he is not president, the next 4 years, he would have concentrated, like a laser beam on how do we get more choice for students. By the way, this is the single best thing you can do for the government schools is to make them compete, right? It's not a complicated model. You want better public schools? Make them compete for students. So that's the only answer I can give.
So Steve, let's talk about other economic policies over the next 4 years. You did us all the service of reading the Biden plan and the McGovern plan and every other plan, but we all know not every president gets his whole plan. Looks like
Thank God in this case.
Right, and it looks like we're going to have a virtually 50-50 Senate. We can talk about all the permutations there. But what are you thinking if, let's just say for the sake of discussion, if the Senate looks something like it is, and if...
You mean like 50, where the Republicans have the majority?
Yes.
Yeah, right.
What do you think a President Biden, under the current political circumstances, could actually get done of his plan? Right? You've talked about what his aspirations are, but what do you think the outcomes could be?
I don't know. I mean, it's a great question. I've been thinking a lot about that.
Sure.
Maybe
I think a lot of us have.
It's hard to figure out. Are Republicans going to go for his $4 trillion tax increase? No. One of our good friend Grover Norquist. Republicans aren't voting for a tax increase. Period. So he's stymied. Thank God on that. I take that personally because the first thing you want to do is repeal our tax cut. I helped write that tax cut. It was a phenomenal success. I mean, this is the triumph of ideology over science. We did the experiment. We had the best economy ever, and then they wanted to repeal. They still want to repeal it. We're dealing with, and we'll be dealing with this for the next couple of years, an anti-Trump derangement syndrome. So anything that Trump was for, they will try to repeal. Now, look, turnabout is fair play. We repealed a lot of the stuff Obama did, except we were right and they were wrong. But I think they will make a case out of just, on the first day. I mean, I saw Biden give some comments either yesterday or this morning, and he said, well, one of the first things we're going to do is put America back into the Paris Climate Accord. I mean, how stupid is that? I mean, the Paris Climate Accord is a disaster. None of the countries are complying with it. It's just like any other treaty. It's just basically they want the United States to jump off the cliff and none of the others will. But I think there will be a concentrated effort to use, you're going to see from Biden, the use of executive actions. And the scariest part, which Adam at Freedom Works is going to be very involved in, is the re-regulation, right, Adam? I mean, they're going to put leftists in charge of these, regulatory agencies at EPA and FDA and all of these, and that has real negative effects. We estimate, by the way, that our deregulation policies over the last 4 years increased on an average household income by $3,000. It's a giant number. The average income is $66,000. So a $3,000 increase in their household income because of deregulation. So, if you, as my friend Art Laffer would say, what we did, the reason Trump was such an incredible success on the economy was we just turned the dials in the growth direction on taxes, on regulation, on energy, on trade, and down the line. It was all pro-business, pro-markets. Not all, but most of them were. And Biden basically saying, you know what, we're going to turn those dials back in the opposite direction. Yeah. If you do that, you get the opposite result, right? So I think I'm most worried about the resurrection of the regulatory state.
And Steve, one more question on that, and then we'll take, I know there's some cards coming around and YouTube comments or whatever. Some of your, I think, best work over the Trump years has been on the impact of what you just talked about, his economic policies on working people, on minorities. Yes, of course, you said pro-business a couple minutes ago. Of course, I think in this room with our values, we love capitalism, but there's a reason why, at least I would argue, there's a reason why so many working people changed their voting patterns over the last couple of years. Could you talk a little bit more about what your work has shown about how those economic policies helped working people, helped minorities.
Yeah, well, that's one of my favorite questions. Thank you for asking that. I mean, I wrote this book, Trumponomics, which really chronicles a lot of this. But, you know, I remember I went to see the president about a month ago, and, you know, it was fun. You know, it's always fun to go in the Oval Office. It's just cool. And, you know, we're sitting there. And
We're all jealous.
He's just a charming guy. He really is. I mean, I love to be around him. He's intellectually curious. He's charming. He's, you know, but anyway, so, you know, I had asked Mark Meadows, the chief of staff, if I could, you know, talk to Trump for 15 minutes about something. And I said, Mr. President, I want to tell you something. You're going to get this October surprise that's going to blow you away. I told him you're going to get a 33% growth in the GDP, and it's going to come out a week before the election. And, you know, you should have everybody prepared to just blow it out. And I mean, he was dancing a little jig in the White House about that. He loved that. You know, he loves, you know, good news. Anyway, 33% growth. And then, you know, his first debate was so bad. And I remember the last question was like, what are you most proud of? You know, and he said something, I put 350 people on the course. That was not a good answer. You know, it was a bad answer. What he should have said, and he had like a brain fart or something, because he should have said, I am most proud of what I've done for minorities. Because there is he is absolutely right about this. There is no president in modern times who has done more for minorities than Donald J. Trump. It's just factually true. I mean, the idea that he is a racist, I get so angry when people call Donald Trump a racist. Number one, he isn't a racist, but number two, his policies have benefited minorities hugely. So let me give you a few examples. Black family income grew more in 3 years under Trump than in 8 years under Obama. Think about that. In 3 years, we had more growth in income than in 8 years under Obama. Under Donald J. Trump, the poverty rate, you know, there's a lot of ways you can measure the success of policies, right? You could say, look at GDP, look at the unemployment rate, look at what happens median family income. I mean, there might be 20 different ways you could measure whether a policy has worked. But one very respectable way of measuring it, and something probably liberals would you know, approve of as a measure, is how are these policies affecting the least among us, right? The least among us. Well, if that's the measurement, Trump has been the most spectacular success ever. The poverty rate in the United States by the end of 2019 was the lowest in the history of the United States. That means we had a smaller percentage of Americans that were poor under Trump than any other time in the history of our country. And by the way, the black poverty rate fell to its lowest level. The Hispanic poverty rate fell to its lowest level. The Asian poverty rate. By the way, here's another amazing thing. Sorry, I'm rambling a little bit here, but I get so angry about this too. America is not a systemically racist country, period. We are not systemically racist. And if you look at what has happened with, does anybody know which ethnic group has the highest average income in the United States by a mile? Asians, they're off the charts. I mean, Asians, the median household income of Asians today is just shy of $100,000. I mean, I'm old enough, John, maybe you are, to remember when $100,000 was rich, right? I mean, $100,000, the average Asian family is rich. Wait a minute, they're brown-skinned Asians, right? They're people of color, and they have the highest, by the way, Hispanics have made enormous progress. Over the average Hispanic income today in the United States is like $53,000. There's no other country in the world where the Hispanic income is anywhere near that level. So, you know, I think forget what your question was, but I am very proud, and I think Trump should be proud of the fact that we did a lot to advance and the last one is, by the way, school choice. Who are the people benefit? You know this, you've done so much work on this. I mean, is there any single thing in America that would benefit Black Americans more than school choice? And by the way, Black Lives Matter is against it. That tells you all you need to know.
Amen. So, Steve, some questions from the audience. You mentioned that your friend Milton, and of course, we're all jealous.
I was
you're
bragging,
the only
you know,
guy
I mean,
here
I just, you know,
who's hung out with Milton Friedman and the
that was
President of the United
pretty cool.
States.
That
Like,
was
I
pretty
mean,
cool.
just, we love that. But you said he's one of the 3 greatest economists of all time. Who are the other 2?
Keynes, and, you know, I mean, in terms of his influence, you know, Keynes had us, and of course, Adam Smith.
Who was the 3rd one?
Milton Friedman,
Yeah, Keynes.
John Maynard Keynes, and of course, Adam Smith.
Adam Smith. All right, great.
Did I leave out anybody, John?
Next question, Steve.
By the way, Keynes was not the leftist that, you know, he's portrayed to be. If you read Keynesian stuff, I mean, Keynes' writings, he was an incredible economist. And he did, I think, you know, what you had is neo-Keynesian, which is a bastardization of some of the things he believed in.
Yeah.
Is that, do you agree with that?
He was a great guy, and he bastardized him, Keynes. The classical Keynes.
Right.
Bunch of questions about taxes. Shock, I know. What can Biden get done on taxes without a majority in the Senate? And also, if you can get this far into the details, do you have a sense of what's likely to happen on capital gains versus income versus corporate taxes?
Yeah. So first of all, I think, you know, I made, you don't want to take any investment advice from me because I pulled all of my money out of the market 2 weeks ago and it's gone through the roof. So I should have been listening to John. But anyway, and the reason was I was afraid of a blue wave. And I do believe the reason the market has accelerated so dramatically is because of a belief by the markets. And I think they're a little bit irrationally exuberant right now, because I do think there is some risk Democrats could win those 2 Georgia seats, although I don't think it's likely. I think it's possible. But once, I mean, investors aren't stupid. I mean, they could see that, okay, Biden's going to be president, but he's going to be stymied, you know, by, I mean, the 2 most important people in Washington starting in 3 months, if this election holds up the way it is, the first obviously is going to be Joe Biden, and who's going to be the second most important person? You know, the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell. And so, you know, you've got the 2 most important people in any government are the leader and the leader of the opposition. And so, you know, McConnell will have enormous power. He'll have, I mean, if I were Biden, if I were advising Biden, I'd say, we got to peel off some of these Republicans. You know, we got to go after Romney. We got to go after Susan Collins. By the way, Susan Collins is someone I greatly respect. I'm not, she's in a very tough state. And then, you know, a few of the other kind of moderate Republicans, I can't even think of who they are. And I would spend all my time trying to peel them off. But I just don't see any chance of a tax increase, 0. And that's good because the Biden plan, you know, raised the capital gains tax, it raised the corporate tax, it raised the small business tax, it raised the death tax. You know, they wanted to raise the death tax by 40%. So that's very good news that there will be no tax increase, at least for the next 2 years.
What about the other big ticket items that the left really pushed for in this election? Green New Deal, you know, cutting down on fracking, packing the court. Should we be sleeping any easier about those things?
So, you know, there's going to be no packing of the court, obviously, with a 51-seat majority for the Republicans. There will be no end to the filibuster, which was and look, I'm the biggest advocate of the filibuster. Even when Republicans, there was some talk, you know, a few years ago about Republicans getting rid of the filibuster. I'm like, are you crazy? If I had my way, it would take 80 votes to get anything through you know, I want as few laws as possible, right, John? Not more laws, less laws. I want to make it hard for them to pass laws. And so, thank God, it looks like for now, the filibuster is preserved. On the Green New Deal, that's an interesting one. I mean, I remember, you know, a bunch of reporters were asking me, you know, in the weeks before the election, do you think that Joe Biden will abolish fracking? I said, no. I mean, no, he's not going to abolish it. He's going to do to the oil and gas industry what the left did under Obama to the coal industry. He's just going to strangle the industry and make it so unprofitable that you get disinvestment. And that's what's going to happen now. You're going to see, you know, the EPA and all of these things are going to come back at a time when, as you know, the oil and gas industry are wildly profitable because of the low prices. And so I think that will diminish, you know, that industry. And it's a shame, by the way, because we have something here in Pennsylvania that is the greatest fuel in the history of mankind. It's called natural gas. It is everything you want in an energy source. It is abundant, it's cheap, it's reliable, it's made in America, and it's clean burning. Why? Somebody out there, please tell me why the left is against natural gas. Really, seriously. I mean, and natural gas is like $2. I mean, it's gone from what, $11 to $2. That's not good for Pennsylvania, but for the rest of us, it means a cheap and reliable energy source. And You know, we need to be talking, some of my friends that like Pacific Research Institute talk about energy poverty. And when you raise the price of energy, who you're hurting? You're not hurting people like you and me or rich people. You're hurting the people at the bottom whose energy prices go up. So green energy is just a regressive tax on poor people.
Amen. Steve, how about let's switch to China and trade. Can you talk a little bit about what you think the impact of a Biden presidency might be on trade policy, especially with respect to China?
That's a hard one to figure out. You know, Biden has been all over the map on China. And so I can't quite figure that one out. I mean, Biden historically has been pretty much a patsy when it comes to China. He's made statements that, you know, China is not a problem for the US and so on. I believe, you know, it's really interesting. You know, I talked about, you know, Republicans being on Venus and Democrats being on Mars. I mean, you know, you look at every poll. I mean, just as an example, how do you think it's important to keep the economy open, even with the virus, or fight the virus first and keep the economy shut? This is like a perfect example of what I'm talking about. 75% of Republican voters say keep the economy open. Only 25% of Democratic voters say that. So there's, you know, it is a complete ideological split on that. Now, there is one issue in America that almost all Americans are in almost, you know, 85% are in agreement with. China is a big problem. Americans are very worried about China, and I happen to think they should be. And I think one of Trump's enduring legacies will be to raise the siren alarms on China. You know, I believe China, I'm not a national security expert, but, you know, in terms of the way it's building up its military, its predatory trade and economic policies, its abuses of human rights. I mean, I believe you know, China is Japan circa 1938. I really think that's how dangerous it is. And so I hope that that Biden gets really tough with China, but I don't really know where he's headed on that.
So apparently people are really interested in this topic. We have a few follow-up questions on that. I'm going to give them to you in a three-part quick series. How do you explain Trump's anti-free trade rhetoric? Is he right about higher tariffs?
Is he right about what?
Is Trump right about higher tariffs?
About higher tariffs, yeah.
And the third question is my favorite. What would Friedman say to Trump?
Yeah, those are tough ones. So, you know, if you read my book that I wrote, you know, Trump has had some impact on my thinking. You know, I used to be a unilateral free trader, as I believe, would you say Milton Friedman was a unilateral free trader? He would basically say, you know, we should buy whatever we can at the lowest prices possible. And if the other countries don't want to buy our stuff, you know, that's fine. And, you know, you know, so I get that and I respect that position. And, but I'm not there anymore. I do think we live in a world where the Trump doctrine on trade was, look, the optimal situation is that every country reduces their tariffs. And I think the problem with Milton Friedman's, you know, position was, okay, wouldn't it be better if both countries were free trade? And what Trump really understood, I mean, Trump is a very smart person. Sometimes he does really stupid things, but he's no dummy. I mean, I think his IQ is very high. He's incredible, insightful. And his point was, look, if you want to understand Donald Trump, I've said this from the first moment I met him, you have to read his book, The Art of the Deal. This is a deal maker, and he's good at it. And his point was, like, he used to always tell me this, like, to be a good deal maker, you have to have leverage, right? You have to have leverage. And we have leverage over China. We may not have it for long, but right now, you know, we have leverage. They need us more than we need them. And I think Trump's approach to China was, you know, for the most part, successful. And so I actually supported his China tariff policy as a strategic way to, you know, to get them to behave themselves, because they are engaged in stealing our intellectual property and predatory trade practices, and they're just not honest, you know, brokers. What I oppose is protectionism of certain industries. So I was always against his steel tariffs. I think those were actually counterproductive. I would tell him, I'm like, Donald, yeah, you provide job, you might save 50,000 jobs in the steel industry, but all of the downstream industries, now we have higher price. That's what Milton Friedman would say, right? Now we have higher steel prices for our manufacturers and our car producers and and out of net, we're probably going to lose jobs now. So that's kind of where I am on this. And look, tariffs are taxes. I understand that. But I'd rather, this is my own view. I'd rather, if we're going to have a tax, I'd rather tax, stuff that are coming into the United States than taxing what we produce here. That's why I've always thought maybe switching to some kind of getting rid of our corporate tax and moving towards a value-added tax would be, economically superior. Why do we tax what the American producer produces, not what is produced in, Japan or Germany or France? And I know many of you may not agree with that, but that's my position. I'm sticking with.
Well, Steve, I'll stick up for you. I think the founders would have found some merit in that position.
What's that?
I think the founders would have found some merit in your position, and Lincoln,
By the way, it's a great point. I mean, you all know that for the first 120 years of our country, how did we raise revenues?
No income tax, it was tariffs.
There were tariffs and land sales. We should go back to that. We should sell land, right? What a great way to, privatize the lands, right, Adam? That'd be a great policy.
I mean, it could work. We could go back to that. The other idea I heard today was, we might need some time to recount the votes and stuff for this election. Maybe we should go back to swearing the president and in March like we did way back then. I don't know about that. Another question for you, Steve. How will a Biden presidency affect our healthcare system and our health?
I'm not really an expert on healthcare. I'm just, it's not my area of expertise. And some of the people in this room know more about healthcare than I do. I mean, obviously I'm in favor of, a free enterprise system in healthcare. It is, my line on this is just very simple, that we have two industries in America that are out of control in terms of, price increases, and that those are education and healthcare, the two industries that are run by government. And so, we need to this is just a fundamental difference between where we are and they are. They do want a slow motion government takeover of the healthcare system. I want patient power. I want to put, price transparency, competition, all of these things work in every other industry. Why wouldn't they work in healthcare? So I am worried about, and look, but then they say, oh, well, we have the highest cost in healthcare of any country. Well, there's a good reason for that. Who's producing the vaccine? Not Britain, not Germany, not France, not China. We are. We're the ones who provide the, productivity improvements that have made, our healthcare system. Do we pay for healthcare in a very sound way? No, we don't. It's a bad system. But, we have by far the best health delivery system in the world. We have the best medicine, the best treatments, all of that. So, and I don't think we want to sacrifice that. I think we're making a big mistake if we do.
So we've got a spirited group, both in the room and on YouTube, and somebody's going to take issue a little bit with what you said about Trump's book.
About his what?
About his book, The Art of the Deal.
Oh, right, yeah.
The question is, if Trump is such a great deal maker, why did he fail to get a new deal on Obamacare early in his presidency?
That's touche. That's a good question, and I don't have a good answer for it. The problem is Republicans don't do healthcare very well, right, Adam? It's just Republicans don't talk about this issue well, and we need intellectual leaders like you to help us frame that issue, because we lose on that issue. We lose on healthcare. We win on taxes and trade and all these other issues, but we've been losing on healthcare for a long time because our messaging has been poor. And I'm not the person to ask, how do we get on the offensive on that? Adam, I don't know if you have any thoughts about how do we persuade people that the free enterprise system is the best way to go on healthcare? I mean,
We got to have a free enterprise system first.
right? Yeah.
There you go.
It's just tough. I mean, Joan, do you have any thoughts about this? Because it's just frustrating because we know this. We know that, medical savings accounts have been very successful and they provide people with, I don't know you very well. You and I, let's say maybe we have the same income, we're alike in a lot of ways. You may have very different preferences and what you want in healthcare than I do. You may want a high deductible plan and, and pay lower premiums, and you want coverage for all these different things. And I want a scaled back program. And the left doesn't want that to happen. They want to put everybody in the same boat. And one of the things I really object to, I'll make one comment on healthcare. The whole coronavirus episode has been instructive. What is the single factor that has been most associated with problems with coronavirus? Anybody know what it is? Obesity. People are overweight, have big problems, and it's not the only one, but it is the one. It's politically incorrect to talk about that. I mean, the New York Times has a 8,000 word piece about blacks are more likely to have health problems with blah, 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 and they never mentioned the word obesity once. The point I'm making is that the left believes all health outcomes are just random. They're not. Lifestyle accounts for about 50% of the changes in why one person might get sick and another person doesn't. If you smoke, you're more likely to get sick. If you don't exercise, you're more likely. If you overeat, if you engaged in bad behavior, that's going to make you more sick. And why shouldn't we allow insurance companies to adjust insurance premiums? In other words, if you want to go and smoke, have at it, but I don't want to pay for your health care. If you want to gain 200 pounds, that's your right. I'm a libertarian, but I don't want to pay for your healthcare problems. And so many of I think the single greatest crisis in America today, other than our education system, is obesity. It really is. We're a nation of fat people, and we'd be a lot healthier, and our healthcare costs would go down, and then it would be a dramatic improvement. So, and all obesity is associated with diabetes and all of these other problems, heart disease, and so on. So.
Well, Steve, we can't let you end on that politically incorrect note. So the last question is, can a nice guy who's not Trump, who believes in the policies of Trump, win in 24?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. I believe the answer is absolutely yes. Reagan, won in no small part because he was so likable. And presidential races are personality conflicts. I always said, the outcome of this election, I've been saying this for 6 months, is very simple. If people vote if people vote on Trump's performance, he will win. If they vote based on his personality, he will lose. At the end of the day, people, we talked about this, earlier, especially for white suburban women, they just could not get over his oftentimes abusive, language and offensive treatment of people. And so, you take Trump's agenda and you put a Ronald Reagan type of person on that person's going to win a landslide. And by the way, but I think Trump I'm not counting this guy out now or 4 years from now. He will be older, but what's interesting is, I think you might, let's say you had a kinder, gentler Donald Trump 4 years from now. I think he could beat Kamala Harris, and so that will be an interesting situation. But the other thing is, so what Trump really proved, you've got to admire Trump, whether you like him or not, is, he took an incredible risk in running. And he has taken so much abuse. I mean, has there ever been a president in history who's taken the abuse that Donald Trump has taken? I mean, I'd go to the press conferences, the media they were just treated him like dirt. It was really offensive. I didn't like Barack Obama. I didn't like any of his policies. I disagreed almost with everything Obama did, but none of us treated Obama, like he was a scumbag or something like that. And the left has done that. And, Trump has prevailed. It's really pretty amazing that he accomplished what he did in his 4 years, given, that he had zero help from Democrats. He had zero help from the media. They tried to impeach him for, 2 years on a completely fallacious, Russia collusion hoax. And, I just think, that's amazing. We should treat the president with, when Biden called him a clown. I mean, that was pretty bad. Although Trump, brings it on himself because he uses some pretty offensive language too. So I do think you're going to see the Republicans embrace a economic populist message in 2024. I just don't know if Trump is going to be the torchbearer for it.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we promised you one of the most incisive and interesting economic commentators of our time. I think he delivered, and John Miko is going to close out our event.
Charles, Steve, thank you so much. Very insightful, very interesting, and always fun. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Charles. And that is tonight's Liberty Series. Our next program is next Thursday. We have a public affairs program with Carl Schramm. Carl is an entrepreneur, a business leader, a writer, a professor at Syracuse University, and he's going to be talking about saving America's dying cities. That's next Thursday, 6:30, Public Affairs. We look forward to seeing you then. Thank you and good night.